And I think it's also inevitable that they will surpass the United States in terms of GDP. Of course, it would take a long time before their living standard could be considered comparable, but it's almost inevitable that it will happen. So you might say, well, if it's inevitable, why even try to resist? Well, it's not a matter of resisting. It's that for these reasons that I've discussed, that we've been in such a great possession of being number one in just about every metric, that we haven't needed to work this hard. And my proposition is that by exporting, we will improve our lot greater than by doing just about any other activity. I mean, look at it this way. If you have a company and you want to increase the dollar value of your turnover, you want to do more business, in other words, let's look at all the things we could do. We could try sending more emails. Well, that's a good idea. You might make some sales because of those, but there's another school of thought that says that email marketing is on the decline. It's not nearly as effective as it was, say, a decade ago when emails were new. I remember when I got my first email suggesting that I should buy a Rolex watch, and I remember thinking, wow, who even knows me, and who would think that I want a Rolex watch? By the way, I've never owned one, and I don't have a particular desire to own one, but I was chuffed that someone would think of me and suggest this. Well, now, of course, we recognize it as spam email, and we're all abhorrent about it. We don't want spam. We have spam filters and spam blockers, and we try and, get rid of spam out of our inbox. So email marketing has gone down in terms of effectiveness. So I don't think that's a way of increasing your business. You could rent a bigger warehouse if you operate out of a warehouse, but you need to know what you do with the extra space before that's a good strategy. Similarly, you could hire more staff, but what are those staff going to do if you don't have a strategy behind the hiring of extra staff? Singularly, the best thing that I believe we can do to improve the turnover of our company is to go global, specifically for the reason that so few companies, especially in the United States, are doing that. When you only sell your products domestically, you've got a potential market of about 320 million people here in the United States. But when you go global, you've got a potential market of 7 billion people. Now, you might say, Dolf, many of those people, those 7 billion, they don't have the money or the resources or the wherewithal to buy what we've got. Well, that's true. But even if you just look at exporting, say, to the EU, they have more people in the EU, the 27 member nations at the moment, than we do here in the United States. So you can double the size of your potential market just by exporting to one smallish region of the world. And then Asia is absolutely booming. If you haven't been there lately, I suggest that you should go because it is mind-boggling. Don't rely on just seeing little news clips on CNN and Fox and all the other, I shouldn't mention any brands, but on all the TV channels to decide whether it's booming or not. Go there and see for yourself. It is absolutely mind-boggling what's going on. And there is a way you can participate. And here's another feature, and I'm not picking on the United States. I love it here. I live here by choice. But in terms of members of the so-called Western world, the United States has an extraordinarily low propensity to go global. In fact, I believe that only 17% of Americans even have a valid passport. That is an astonishingly low number when you come from a country like New Zealand, as I do, where the percentage of people who hold a passport is in the 90s. And in Australia, it's the same thing. In fact, everyone in those countries, you sort of have to travel to see anything else of the world. You can't fly for many hours in New Zealand without going overseas, so it's more natural. But still, people are more inclined to do it. Every kid, by the time they reach the age of 18 or 19 or certainly 20, gets kicked out of New Zealand to do what's called the Big OE. It stands for Overseas Experience. They go and bartend in London, and then they go backpacking on the continent, and they travel around a few countries and a few continents, and they come back 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 years later, and they've had a blast and done all the things that young people do. But they're also a little bit worldly wide. They understand a little bit about the world. And that is something that is not done very often here in the States. It's just not typical to do that. And I can understand why. The States is a much vaster country. It has many more geological different things. It has much more geological diversity, so you can experience Arctic wonders up in Alaska or tropical paradise in Hawaii, complete with bikini-clad people on beaches, without needing a passport. I know it's true. However, you have to go overseas to a different culture where they speak a different language, where they have different foods, to understand how other parts of the world truly operate. And many times Americans will come back and say, that we feel blessed that we're here, and that's also true. But there will also be times when you say, wow, that is something that's really great over there. That's an advantage.